Hey everybody. Yeah, yesterday I focused on, I guess, like in retrospect, in yesterday's video, I said, oh, I worked on the component stuff, but really what I worked on was, in retrospect, was um, changing the styles or the animation, like refactoring the animation types to accommodate cameras. So then what ended up happening, and then I thought, oh, okay, so now I'm done with component stuff. I'm going to move on to one of the next pieces. And by component stuff, I mean more like the uh, the camera, um, the camera. Uh, Let me do this. The camera stuff. Like I thought, oh, okay, I'm done with the camera components. Um, but I was wrong. What I would now what I did was I needed to update the camera items so that they actually, like the X position, actually is a property, an animation property descriptor instead of just a number, which then cascaded into a bunch of other camera updates, which, like, based on what I was kind of saying before, wasn't like to me like would have been indicative of a problem. But since all the updates were completely isolated to the camera side or to the camera things and didn't really cascade into the meshes or the lights, I think that we're still in really good shape. Um, but I will say that as we're expanding, what's happening is when we want to make system wide changes, or when I want to make system wide changes, like there's more pieces to update, there's more steps to do. And, and it's kind of like if you were like, oh, you lived in a one bedroom, one bath house, and then you're like, okay, let's clean the bathrooms. And you're like, okay, we're done. And then, like, let's say you keep building onto your house and now you have a 10 bedroom 10 bath house. You're like, let's clean the bathrooms. It's the same task, but it is a lot more. And like back in the day when I worked in the enterprise, there was like all these philosophies and ideas, abstract ideas about software development that kind of were all bundled up in a concept called agile. And that a lot of those agile concepts, like in actual practice, while they made total sense when we were discussing them in an abstract way, especially like around velocity and being able to get more done as things get better, um, ended up not being real. And that's because the vocabulary changes, right? Like cleaning the bathroom when you have bedroom, one bath house means something different than cleaning the bathroom when you have a 10 bedroom, 10 bath house. And that's what I would always say is just like kind of like there's like an inflation that comes along as these applications get bigger and more complex, that is not captured at all. Like agile methodologies are just too simplistic. They don't take into account that you know changing the tire when you have a small Ford economy car is different than changing a tire on a 777. It's a whole different thing. And as these applications, they don't start off as a 777. They start off as a small application with just like a few people working on them many times to a enormous application with 100 people working on them sometimes, and it is totally different. And anyways, so this was just one of those aha moments where I was like, that's why that didn't work the way. Because, like you get convinced of things. Like you sit in these agile classes and they convince you of things and everything they're saying makes sense. But then you go to do it and it doesn't work. But anyways, I wanted to experiment a little bit. So this is not code related. This is 3JS and 3D related. I wanted to experiment with meshes, and so basically what I have here is a wall that's sitting at 0, 0, 0, and it's 100 tall and 100 wide, and zero point 0.1 thick. And then I have a red mesh, And this red mesh is a basic mesh that's the color of red. And then I have a green mesh that is a white mesh. It's a Phong, and it's the color of white. And so I thought in my mind, and they're both 0.1, and I thought in my mind that the this would be green because it's 0.1, and I believe based on my experiments, the lights seem to be like 0.3. So I thought, oh, it's going to be completely surrounded by green, but that is not how it works. And it's actually like if we go to the animation and we pause it, it's actually more of a blue and red, and it doesn't have any green. And then to me, right now, what's very interesting is if I come into the mesh and I edit it and I go to the green one and I expand that and I make it like a 1 instead. Right, we don't see any green. So like I would imagine if we could go inside this mesh, it would be all green in there. So so I thought we'd kind of have the reverse. See, since it's absorbing all the green, only the red and the blue show up. And so basically, if you imagine there would be a blue one right here. But so now if we put it back to 0.1, and then you would think there would be a size that like you would that it would be green, maybe bigger or smaller, but there isn't. And then let's see, 0.01. See, when it's tiny, it's still 0.05. It's still like this mix. So I don't know. And that honestly, like when I first started this application, this is what I wanted. This is exactly what I wanted to get to. I wanted to get to the point where I could test how these pieces work together because it was so hard to visualize and understand what's happening. And I wanted to be able to just pause things and see exactly what they're doing easily and not have to write a whole bunch of code just so I can see what happens when I make a 0.5 and a 0.6 radius. I can just try it out in this UI. So anyways, mission accomplished. Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let me close this thing. So the changes. Okay, so at the top of the list is I imported the animation property descriptor and I assigned it to the X position of the perspective camera interface and orthographic camera interface. So that need to definitely do a sort of acknowledgement that this is double work. That early decision to make this perspective, to make these two separate things instead of one thing that kind of holds both is not, it looks like it's not paying off. It looks like that was a mistake. I'm still not fully convinced it was a mistake, so I want to see how this plays out. But at this point, I want to continually remind myself the decisions and the consequences. That's important. And then it rolls down into this where I'm making two sets of changes. And again, I made a change. Oh, okay. I just deleted the extra code, form code that I had added last time. So we can ignore that. In the forms, I ended up having to do double work again. So in the HTML, all I had to do is change it from X position object to start value, and the same goes for the perspective. And then in the TypeScript, just the standard, hey, you gotta do it. Now in Mesh and Light, I had to do it 4 times. Over here, I only have to do it 2 times, and that's because creating meshes happens in the service, not in the actual components like they did over there. And then in the service, basically where we create it. So this is like kind of the other half. We did that. We basically, when we create it, and when we create both of them, double work again. There you go. Consequences in both of these, and then when we create meshes, and then when we set up, we get the X camera position that would be displayed here from the position. So those make sense. I think everything seems rational and reasonable. I think the next step, I have 2 choices. One, I could actually try to make it animated, or I could get it to show up in the animation form. Historically, I think I've started off trying to make it animated and then going to the form, but then I think now it makes sense to make it in the form now that the form exists and it's mature, and then make it animated. I don't know. We'll see tomorrow which direction I go. Bye. Happy coding.